A poor village boy saves a woman from a flash flood, unaware that she is a billionaire who would never forget his act of kindness. Rain came down hard, as if it had old scores to settle. In the tiny, unremembered village set deep in Louisiana's southern swamps, the sky burst open quickly. The big storm had been heading further east, or so the weather forecast said, but it swerved off its path as if it had its own will. Within just an hour, the bayou spilled over. Thin dirt tracks vanished, and the sky became the shade of worn, rusted metal. Elliot Granger had just finished fixing a neighbor's roof when he heard it, a sharp, desperate yell carried by the wind like a keen knife through thick fog. "Help! I can't swim!" He froze. The rain pounded his shoulders. Mud stuck to his boots, but his legs moved before his mind caught up. He ran fast down the sloped road that curved towards the old wooden bridge crossing the lower swamp. The water was already touching the posts. Through heavy rain and deep fear, he saw it. A black SUV half underwater, stuck sideways against the bridge's edge, its light still blinking under the rising water. Inside, a woman was hitting her hands against the window. Elliot ripped off his wet jacket and jumped onto the railing, then onto the car's hood. The water moved the car like a small toy. He grabbed the metal bar from his tool belt and broke the passenger window in 3 strong hits. Glass flew outwards into the dark water. Her scream was quieted. She was gasping for air, crying, "I can't, please, I can't breathe." He reached in and pulled at her seatbelt, cutting it with a small knife. "I've got you," he said, trying to keep her looking at him. "See me, you're coming along." She was soaked, shaking badly, almost unable to speak. "I don't know how to." "Don't worry about swimming, just hold tight." He grabbed her arm, pulled her through the window as the SUV made a groaning sound under them. The back tires lifted. The car was about to sink. "Now!" he shouted, throwing her arm around his shoulder. "We're moving quickly." The water hit them strongly. Elliot kicked, fighting the pull of the floodwater. Trash floated by. Tree branches, plastic containers, a kid's 3-wheel bike. The woman clung to him like breathing itself. She coughed hard, sputtering water. "Stay with me," he yelled over the loud noise. "You go, I go. I'm not letting go." Her fingers squeezed tighter. It took all his strength to pull her sideways along the water's edge until they reached the hidden remains of an old tool shed, mostly forgotten, half fallen against the high river bank. He dragged her inside, using a rusty wheelbarrow to block the entrance. As the water kept slowly coming in, they fell onto the wooden floor, both of them breathing hard. Water touched their lower legs. Elliot took a cover from the corner and wrapped it around her shaking body. The woman's eyes fluttered, barely able to see clearly. Where are we?" "Somewhere dry enough," he said, bending beside her. "That's all that matters." He could not see her face well in the dimness, just the shape of her jaw, the way her chest moved up and down too fast. He put a hand on her forehead. She was burning up. Shock was starting. He reached into his bag, pulled out an emergency blanket, a granola bar, and a small bottle of water. "Here, eat. Drink some." She tried to sit up, but her body sagged. Elliot helped her steady. "No hero moves tonight." "All right, we're not dying in a stupid tool shed." She gave a weak laugh. "That's good to hear." Thunder growled overhead. Rain hit the tin roof like angry fists. Water was up to their knees now, but the walls were holding firm. "Got a name?" he asked, just to keep her awake. She paused. El?" he repeated. "All right, I'm Elliot." She gave a slight nod. "Thank you, Elliot." The water was cold. His legs were numb, but he didn't care. He sat beside her, holding her wrist softly, checking her pulse, keeping her awake with tales about the village, about his grandma who raised him, about how he once got chased by a goose called Walter. She laughed, truly laughed, and somewhere between the flood and the fear in that half-drowned shed, Elliot forgot about the storm. She fell asleep near dawn, her hand still holding his. He did not let go. The rain slowed with the coming dawn, but the floodwater had not yet gone down. Gray light spread through the twisted wood of the tool shed, showing what was left of a night that felt like it had lasted forever. Elliot hadn't slept. Ellie, or whatever her real name was, lay wrapped in the emergency blanket, her breathing steady now, her forehead cooler than it had been hours before. Her wet hair stuck to her cheek, her hands, once shaking, now rested quietly in her lap. He had kept the fire going all night with dry bark he found piled in a tipped-over barrel, and shared the rest of his granola bar between them, insisting she eat even when she said no. She was awake enough now, calmer, but there was something else in her, something hidden. When she opened her eyes and saw him watching her, she didn't flinch. She just gave him the faintest smile. "I need to leave as soon as I can," she said softly, her voice still rough from the night before. Elliot nodded. "Of course. Roads are still out, but rescue boats have been working the lower swamp since sunrise. I've got a friend with a radio. I'll get someone here." She pushed herself to sit up, wincing a little. "It's not that I want to leave. I have to." He could have asked, who was she? Why had she been driving through a dead-end bridge in a fancy SUV during a big storm? Why was she alone? Why did she seem like she was running from something? But Elliot had grown up around quietness, around people who kept their hurt hidden as if it might bite if let out. He understood too well the value of not pushing, so he said nothing. Instead, he knelt beside her and gently rolled up her pant leg. The cut along her calf had clotted, but it was angry and red. He cleaned it with bottled water, careful and exact, and wrapped it in gauze from his first aid kit. She watched him without speaking. "You do this often?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Growing up out here, you learn how to fix many things, people included." She smiled again, small but true. By late morning, a rescue boat finally arrived. 2 men in bright vests guided it towards the half-flooded tool shed, calling out as they got close. Elliot stood and waved them over. When they helped her into the boat, she stopped at the edge of the dock. She turned back to him. "You saved my life." Elliot opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He only nodded. She stepped closer, reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. She put it into his hand. It was a silver coin, smooth, round, carved with a symbol he didn't know. "That makes you unforgettable," she whispered. And then she was gone. The boat moved away. Elliot stood there, the coin in one hand, the cool wind blowing through his wet clothes. She didn't even know her real name. She never looked back, and somehow that hurt more than he thought it would. 2 years passed. The village dried out. The roads were fixed, and the tool shed, where Elliot had once held a stranger through a flood, turned into little more than a tale whispered by the older people who recalled that night. But for Elliot Granger, it never faded. He still lived in the same house at the edge of the marshlands, where Spanish moss hung low like tired fingers, and the cicadas buzzed louder than silence. His grandmother, now mostly in bed after her 3rd stroke, depended on him for everything: bathing, feeding, company. He worked part-time fixing water pumps and heaters for the neighbors, earning just enough for medicine and food. He didn't talk about the night he saved a woman from drowning. Not because it hurt, but because no one would have believed how real it had felt, how much one night with a stranger could plant itself inside him like a seed that never stopped growing. Then one Monday morning, the village library reopened after a quiet renovation. The building had been there for many decades. Nothing fancy, just a single room with bent shelves and the smell of damp and paper. But something had changed. There were new tables, fresh paint, air conditioning that actually worked, and a small sign at the entrance. "This library is made possible by a kind gift from the Lavinia West Foundation." Elliot barely noticed the name. He had come to return a water pump book, but before he could leave, Miss Mara, the librarian who'd known him since he was very young, called out to him, "Elliot, wait! You have to see this!" She led him to a small display in the children's area. 5 new books sat on stands, bright and clean, but it was the one in the middle that made Elliot stop completely. The Boy and the River. The cover was painted by hand, almost like a dream. A boy stood in water up to his waist, holding a light above his head as storm clouds gathered behind him. A woman, half submerged, reached for his hand. His hand. Elliot stared at the picture. The boy wasn't just a boy. It was him. Messy brown hair, the bent scar above his eyebrow, the handmade necklace he'd worn since he was 10, the same tired eyes. It was him, but on a page under a title made into a story. His fingers traced the cover, then slowly opened to the first page. The dedication said, "To the one who saved me. You never asked my name, but you gave me yours. I never forgot. LWW." Elliot sat down without realizing it. He quickly looked through the story. It was written in simple words for children, but the deep meaning behind the words was clear. It told the tale of a woman who drove too far, too fast into a storm. A boy with rough hands who pulled her from a river, who kept her alive in the dark, who never asked who she was, only made sure she survived. And in the last pages, the woman tried to find him. She searched towns and cities, asked for names, wrote about him in her diaries, painted him from memory, but she never found him until she told the story and gave it to the world. Elliot closed the book. He sat in the library for almost an hour, still, his mind replaying every image from that night as if it had just happened. Lavinia West. He had never heard the name before, but somehow he knew. He didn't understand how or why, but the way she looked at him that night, the way her voice shook when she said, "You saved my life," the way she placed that silver coin in his hand, all of it came back. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the coin. He still carried it, smooth, round, carved with a wave and a star. Now, at last, it meant something more than just a memory. It meant a link. He stood up, the book still in hand, and asked Miss Mara, "Do you know who Lavinia West is?" She smiled, eyes sparkling. "Honey, she's a very rich person. Owns a big tech company up north, but people say she's different. Doesn't seek fame. Very quiet, but always helping someone." Elliot nodded slowly. He walked out of the library that day with the book held tight to his chest, the coin warm in his hand, and the name Lavinia West echoing in his chest like the first sound of thunder before the rain returns. The rain had been falling since dawn, a steady gray curtain that made the world feel like it had pulled into itself. Elliot stood under the rusted cover of the old gas station, wiping oil from his hands with a cloth that had long given up on being clean. He had just finished fixing the engine part on a pickup truck that belonged to one of the fishing families upriver. It was a normal day until it was not. The soft sound of an approaching engine cut through the quiet patter of rain. Not a local engine. This one was smooth, costly. Elliot turned his head. A sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel lot, tires crunching to a stop. Its windows were dark, spotless, even in the heavy rain. A moment passed, and then the driver's door opened. She stepped out slowly, her heels clicking on wet stone. Her. She wore a long coat, rain-spotted, and under it a dark green shirt tucked into gray pants. Her umbrella stayed closed at her side. She didn't seem to care about the rain. Her hair, longer than he recalled, was pulled into a loose braid. Her face, more refined now, held a calm sort of urgency. She looked at him as if she had seen him yesterday. And then, in the quiet gap between two heartbeats, she said it. "It's truly you." Elliot didn't move. The cloth in his hands dropped to the concrete. "Elle," he said barely above a whisper. A soft smile crossed her lips. "Not exactly. My full name is Lavinia West." Elliot blinked. The name felt different now. No longer just words on a book cover. She was no longer the half-drowned stranger in the dark. She was Lavinia West, very rich tech giver, the woman whose name was on library signs and aid centers, the face behind the book that still sat under his pillow. And she had come back. "I didn't think you'd remember me," she said gently. "How could I not?" he said, voice low. They stood in the rain for a long moment. It was Elliot who finally pointed toward the covered bench just inside the service station. They sat, not quite facing each other. "I wasn't sure I'd find you," Lavinia said. "I had no name, no number, only your face and a few hours of memory that took me months to put together after everything." Elliot watched her carefully. "Why now?" She breathed in slowly. "Because I need your help, and because I never forgot you." He looked away. The rain danced on the ground. I'm starting a new plan, she continued, a set of community-led strong points in flood-prone areas. Learning, supplies, tech, structures, safe places, all built with the people, not just for them. She paused. I want you to help lead the one here, and then come to the city, New Orleans, to begin. You'll be on the design group. You know more about staying alive here than any expert I could pay. Elliot shook his head. I'm not an expert. I fix pumps and change oil. That's what I do. You saved my life, Elliot. You kept me alive with a cover and a granola bar. I've read reports from smart people that taught me less than you did in one night. His jaw tightened. I belong here. This place, these people, they're my life. I'm not asking you to leave them, she said softly. I'm asking you to build something that makes sure they're not forgotten. He looked at her, then truly looked. There was fire in her eyes, not the shiny look of cameras and PR photos, but real shaking urgency. Strong feeling mixed with fear, like she was asking not just for his help, but for something more. I thought you left, he said. That night after they pulled you out, I waited. I looked for a name, anything. You just disappeared. Lavinia's shoulders drooped. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. Head injury. They said I almost drowned. I remembered the water, your voice, your hands, but not much else. I didn't even know where I'd been rescued from. It took me months to trace the storm path and figure out where I might have ended up. She looked down at her hands. And when I did, I was scared. Of what? That you wouldn't be who I remembered, or worse, that you were, and I didn't deserve to find you. Elliot felt something move in his chest, a tight feeling that had been there since the day she left. It loosened just a bit. I read your book, he said. Lavinia smiled, almost shyly. It was the only way I knew how to find you. A moment of silence passed. Then Elliot said, You're not what I expected, Lavinia West. She turned to him, her eyes soft. Neither were you. Another strong wind swept across the lot, and her coat moved slightly. I'll think about your offer, he said at last. But I won't make promises. She stood. I don't want promises. Then she paused, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out something small. A silver coin. The same one. I found another one, she said. But the first one, the one I gave you, that was always meant for you. He looked at it, then looked at her, and for the first time in 2 years, Elliot wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. But he knew one thing. He had been seen, and something inside him, a quiet pain, began to stir back to life. Elliot never thought the city would feel so cold. Not the weather. New Orleans was still thick with dampness and rain, but the glass and steel, the echo of elevators, the smooth quietness of executive rooms. He had come because Lavinia asked. He stayed because he believed in her. For weeks, he worked alongside her team on a flood recovery effort meant to support weak communities. His knowledge of land, weather, and country life proved very helpful. He saw purpose in it, felt part of something larger, until he saw the paper. It was late. Most of the staff had gone home. Elliot stayed behind checking money reports for the community centers they planned to build. A misplaced document slid from a folder stamped with the Lavinia West Foundation seal. Project New Eleanor Flood Control Dam status. Finished incident report. Structure failed during storm. Deaths 3. Families moved. 42. Reason. Poor building. Elliot froze. He knew that village. He had walked through its muddy remains after the flood last year. He had helped carry a child through waist-deep water there, and now he saw Lavinia's name at the top of a document linked to the disaster. His hands shook. The next morning, he walked into Lavinia's office, the paper held tightly in his hand. I need to know if this is real, he said. She looked up from her laptop, calm at first, until her eyes met the paper. She read it, quickly checked the damage report, and went completely still. I've never seen this, she whispered. This wasn't checked by me. Elliot stared at her. It has your foundation's mark. I know, but this wasn't me. Later that day, she returned to him with a grim look. She had searched through internal papers. The project had been approved and rushed by the foundation's main leader, her former partner David Hole. He had skipped many checks and faked compliance reports. Lavinia had been kept in the dark. She sat down, clearly shaken. "I trusted him," she said. Elliot didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was low and tight. "If you didn't know, then you didn't care." Her eyes instantly met his. "Don't you dare say that. You paid for a dam that killed people, Lavinia." "I didn't know." "That's the issue," he said. "People died and your name was there. You say you care, but where were you?" "I've spent my life trying to make things right," she cried. "I built this foundation from nothing, fought hard against everything that told me I wasn't good enough. Don't you dare question my heart." Elliot shook his head, pain burning behind his eyes. "You can matter without building a tower, Lavinia. You just had to stay." "And you didn't." That broke her. She stepped back as if his words had hit her physically. Neither of them said another word. That night, Elliot packed his bag. He left the apartment she had set up for him, left the project, the offices, the unfinished community plans. On the kitchen table, he left a note written in pencil. "I can't build anything with someone I no longer trust. I'm sorry." He took a taxi to the train station. Rain splattered the windows as the city faded into gray behind him, and Lavinia stood in the hallway of her empty apartment, holding the note, reading it again and again. For the first time in years, she had no words, only silence and a heart quietly breaking. The rain had come back to the village, softer now, like a gentle song instead of a storm. Elliot stood by the workshop behind his grandmother's house, sanding down an old canoe for repairs. His hands moved on their own, but his mind was far away, still stuck somewhere between New Orleans and that office with too many lies and too much quiet. He had not answered any of Lavinia's calls, hadn't read her emails, hadn't opened the package she sent the day after he left. He wanted to forget her, but he couldn't forget the way she'd looked at him, half strong defiance, half broken, and the way his own heart had cracked when he walked away. Then one late afternoon, her car appeared again. Same sleek shape, same dark windows, but this time she didn't get out. She left a package on his front steps. No knock, no waiting, just left it there and drove off down the muddy path like she never wanted to force anything again. Elliot watched from the shadows, unsure whether to follow, but he didn't move. The package was a leather-bound notebook, thick, worn at the corners. Inside was her handwriting, neat, clean, open, and honest. Page after page, Lavinia had written everything, not just words, but her deep feelings. The first entry was dated 3 weeks after the flood. "I don't remember everything, not the way I want to, but I remember his voice. It was steady when everything else wasn't. There were rough, childlike drawings of a tool shed, of Elliot's face, of the silver coin she had left in his hand. There were notes about her search, leads that went nowhere, days she cried when no one was watching." Another entry months later. "Every business meeting felt louder after him, every round of applause more empty." Page after page, she explained how she had built the foundation to make her survival mean something. How every village she visited, she looked for his eyes. How she had never stopped wondering if he'd ever found peace. And then on a single page, with only one sentence in the center, she wrote, "You think I left? But I never arrived, Elliot. Not truly. Not until you." He didn't realize he was crying until the page blurred. Salt and ink mixed until the words sank into each other. For years, Elliot had carried the guilt of being left behind. He had told himself that maybe she never felt what he did, that maybe he was just a small detail in the story of someone meant for more. But this notebook, this wasn't an act. This was a woman revealing herself with no promise he'd ever read a word of it. He closed the book slowly and pressed it to his chest. The next morning, he went to the edge of the village, the place where the marsh met the road, where travelers either turned back or kept going forward on the long path. She was sitting on a bench near the bayou, her coat pulled tight around her, watching the water move in slow circles. Elliot approached without a word. Lavinia looked up, her breath caught, but she didn't speak first. She let him come to her. He sat beside her, the silence not awkward but full. Finally he said, "I don't want to be angry anymore." Lavinia turned her head, her voice just as soft. "I don't want to be anyone else anymore." They sat with that truth between them. Not a confession, not a promise, just a shared understanding of two people who had run out of ways to pretend. She didn't ask to stay. He didn't ask why she came. That night, Elliot cooked stew over the stove while she chopped carrots with calm precision. They moved around each other like they'd done it 100 times, passing bowls, stirring quietly, handing spices without needing to ask. When dinner was ready, they ate at the small table by the window. No candles, no wine, just 2 spoons and the sound of rain outside. After the meal, they washed dishes. Then they swept the porch. Elliot fixed a leak in the roof while Lavinia folded towels for the kids' class the next day. In the morning, she joined the lesson, sat with legs crossed in the corner as Elliot showed the kids how to build emergency floats with empty milk jugs and rope. One little girl, shy with messy hair, couldn't figure out the knots. Lavinia knelt beside her, patient and kind. "Here," she said, "loop it like this. Now pull tight, but not too tight." The girl looked up at her. "Are you a teacher too?" Lavinia smiled. "Something like that." Later, as the kids ran off with juice boxes and raincoats, Elliot handed Lavinia a warm cup of tea. She drank it slowly. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I know. I'm not asking for anything. I know that too." He looked at her, searching her face for something he couldn't name. She didn't flinch under his gaze. "You don't owe me anything, Lavinia." "I'm not here because I owe you," she replied. "I'm here because I want to be." He didn't respond, just breathed out and nodded. They did not fall into a big hug. There was no rising music, no promises of love. But she didn't leave, and he didn't ask her to. They just kept showing up every day in small ways. They taught the children, they repaired things, they laughed sometimes, and in the quiet hours they stood side by side planting something that had nothing to do with rain or rivers or famous names. They planted trust. And it grew, because love, they had both learned, wasn't always about falling. Sometimes it was about staying. And for the first time in their lives, both Elliot and Lavinia had stopped running. 8 months later, the Floodlight Center stood tall and proud at the edge of the village. It was not grand, no fancy marble columns, no media rush, just clean white walls, strong shutters, and a bright blue roof that shone under the Louisiana sun. Inside were shelves of books, classrooms with maps and first aid kits, a small clinic stocked with real medicine, and a workshop with ropes, life vests, and rain boots hanging neatly. It was built with hard work and given bricks, and more than anything, it was built with the hands and hearts of the people who had once been left behind. Elliot stood at the front steps during the opening event, wearing a plain button-up shirt and boots still marked with paint. Children sat with legs crossed near the speaker stand, some holding handmade signs. Older people in lawn chairs wiped their eyes behind dark glasses. Lavinia stood just behind him, her hand resting gently against his back. Elliot took a breath and stepped forward. "I've never given a speech before," he began, chuckling softly. "And I don't plan to start now." The crowd laughed. He looked out over them, faces he knew, lives he'd seen changed by water, by time, by chance. "I pulled her from a flood once," he said, nodding to Lavinia. "But she pulled me out of something worse. She saved me from drowning in my own doubts, from believing that small lives meant small dreams." He turned, smiling at her. "I never knew who she was, just knew she needed saving. And it turns out, so did I." Applause grew around them. Lavinia stepped up next, but she didn't take the microphone. She simply waved once, smiled softly, and whispered, "Thank you." It was enough. She was no longer the untouchable CEO in shiny magazines, no longer Lavinia West, just Lavinia, a woman who had found a reason to stay. That evening, after the folding chairs had been stacked and the cake was gone, Elliot and Lavinia walked down to the small wooden bridge that crossed the slow-moving river at the edge of the village, the very place where it all began. The sun was setting, painting gold across the water. Lavinia leaned on the railing, staring down at her reflection. "You know," she said, "the woman who drove into that flood. She wasn't someone I liked very much." Elliot stood beside her, quiet. "She was lost," she continued, "even before the water came." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring. Not gold, not silver, just a smooth band carved from cypress wood, hand-polished until it glowed with soft orange light. On the inside, a word was etched, barely visible. "Stay." "This isn't a symbol of perfection," Elliot said. "It's a reminder of what lasts through the storm." Lavinia looked at him, eyes full and bright. She didn't say anything. She just nodded and held out her hand. Elliot slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they stood there, hands joined, leaning on the old bridge as the sky changed from orange to deep blue. Behind them, the laughter of children echoed from the center's yard, calls of "Catch me," and "One more time," floating through the warm air. Ahead of them, the river sparkled with light. They didn't need music, they didn't need promises, just this moment. Two people, one love, and a bridge that didn't just connect two sides of land, but two lives, once lost, now found. Because in the end, it wasn't about the flood. It was about who stayed after the waters went down. And sometimes love does not come with a big show or a perfect plan. It arrives soaked in rain, broken in places, quiet in the way it asks, "Can I stay?" This was not a fairy tale. This was real. A woman who lost her way. A man who never asked for anything but gave everything. And a small bridge in a forgotten village where love decided to return, and this time to stay. If this story stirred something in your soul, if it reminded you that hope can rise even after the flood, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Because here, we believe the heart never forgets the ones who saved it. Subscribe now for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you you are never too lost to be found. Music